Hey everyone, it's nice to see all of you this evening. Thanks for joining us. I hope you visited the 50th anniversary of the Block web pages where you'll find access to the film, the books, the podcast, the poster, and the t-shirt. If you've joined our previous live talkback sessions, thanks so much for participating. And if you've registered for the final two sessions, know that we've decided to postpone those until the fall. But if you have questions, just email the alumni office. I want to thank Steve Hayward for his work on every aspect of this anniversary project and for hosting these live sessions. And I want to extend our gratitude to the ITS events and communications teams for their support. We couldn't do this without you. Again, thanks everyone for being here. Steve, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Tiffany. And also thank you to the ITS folk, most particularly Erica and Dawn, who have been making all of this possible. I want to start with a land acknowledgement and to say that we are coming to you from Colorado College, which is located in Colorado Springs, Colorado, within the unceded territory of the Ute people. The earliest documented peoples also include the Apache, Arapaho, Comanche, and Cheyenne. An extended list of tribes with a legacy of occupation in Colorado can be found on the Indigenous Community at CC webpage. Thank you all for being here both now and forever in the future. Years from now, the date now is March 4th, 2021. And who knows when in the future you will be accessing this video document in which we are doing a talkback session to talk to students, both current and former, and then very former students who were there around the time of the founding of the block plan, and talk a little bit about how their participation in the movie and their reactions to it, what they've been hearing, and sort of relive some of those moments. Before we begin, I want to start off by thanking we actually followed 5 students during the course of making this documentary. And one of the things about making a documentary, and I'm going to be bringing on my co-director, the amazingly talented Brian Beasley, to say a little bit about this. But with the experience about making a documentary, I'd never made a documentary before, and I was guided through by the very wise and thoughtful Brian Beasley. You make a documentary, you have a big thing. I'm trying to get into the Zoom, a long document that you then edit down. And probably the hardest part of the editing is when you're making a documentary film like this, where you are following students, when you have this idea. The idea of the movie from the very beginning was that we would do a historical document. And those of you who were with us last week we had an interesting session with the founders of the plan, who were there in 1968, 1969, 1970, and sort of got some perspective on the historical side of things. But we didn't want to make just a historical document. We wanted to show the way in which the plan was both founded and the way that it exists as a lived reality in the present. And just to pause for a moment, there's a new feature here on our CC Zoom interface, shall we call it. If you look down at your buttons on the bottom of your screen, you'll see you have a raise hand, a Q&A button. At the extreme right of those buttons, or stage right, as we might say, you have a live transcript button. And if that's of use to you, you can click on this and you can actually see you can actually avail yourself of a transcript of the proceedings if it's difficult to hear what we're all saying, or if it just makes things easier for you. So I just wanted to point that out. But as I was saying, one of the hardest things about editing a documentary, especially when you're making a movie like this, where you've followed people, is to decide the characters or the people who you have to unfortunately leave out of the film. And I want to just take a moment to thank 3 people in particular who we followed for this film, but who are still in the film very much, but not quite not fully followed. And they are Shoshana Holt Alslander, and Nick Oldchuck, and actually Alan Townsend, the former provost of Colorado College. We followed all 3 of them. and we try you try to keep people in the film as long as you can, and it's really a sad thing. We had a lot of footage. Eventually, though, the film has to be what it is. You have to be true to that form. If we could just bring up Brian Beasley here, my co-director, to say a little bit about that process, and maybe a little bit about the difficulty of cutting a document like this. Now that wasn't the only footage we cut. We actually had hours and hours, Brian, of footage that did not make it into this film. It's Brian Beasley here, zooming in from LA.
Mostly footage of you, Stephen. There was a lot of footage of you that didn't make the Stephen cut. First of all, thank you. Last second addition here. So I'm sorry I'm bumping some more important people, but it's always good to see everybody. And I couldn't wait for this Zoom because I wanted to see all of our subjects. I can't wait to hear what they have to say and about, they've seen it. I hope we did them well. We definitely tried to represent their stories, and we worked really hard to make sure that we brought truth to every aspect of the film and who they are. So I'm actually very interested to hear what they say. Any art form, whether it be sculpture or writing a novel, which you do all the time, there's always an editing process, and film, especially documentary film, is no different. You don't know what you're going to get. When we start off, we had a bunch of different categories of different students that we wanted to showcase in the film, and athletes, a freshman for sure. We wanted a freshman because we wanted to be able to go along with Liza as an audience member who knew nothing about Colorado College and the block plan and see what that is like for them. Sometimes when you get on the other side, it just, for whatever reason, it doesn't take shape the way you thought it was, or, with Nick, we were super excited. There was a lot of stuff that happened in Nick's storyline that we were really excited to use, but at the end of the day, sometimes you can't turn in a 4-hour cut of a movie, and you have to make really hard choices.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that certainly was the case with Scott and Jackie. They were actually, I think, maybe even in the class with me at the time, which was sort of although Brian, it seemed like a sort of we were like, a calculated process. It was also a little bit of like, hey, the one thing that should be said, everybody involved here, everybody who's going to be on, you're going to be meeting tonight, they're all so enthusiastic and patient. It's a hassle to both make a film and to be in a film. It's like lots of moments, and I'd be interested to sort of one of the well, thank you for being here, Brian, and thanks again for your unerring judgment through it. One thing to be said about Brian Beasley, he's one of the most optimistic people that I have ever seen in my, I've ever had the pleasure to meet. There's a lot, this film took a long time to make, and there were lots of things that happened during the making of this film. Everything from change of leadership in the college to global pandemic,
just a few things.
There were a lot of things that happened, and so we were like, there were lots of moments in it in which I would say something along the lines of what else is going to happen, and Brian,
and then it would.
So it's gratifying to be here. It's interesting. One of the things, just to say a little bit about the process of making film. One of the things that you do when you make a documentary, as with a feature film, is you make you do a treatment, which is essentially the sort of like, it's not quite a script. It's sort of like, it's not a script actually. It's like a sort of like, here's how the movie goes. And it's about, 10 or 15 pages. There's a lot of detail in it. And you wouldn't think that necessarily you would have that in a documentary where you're actually waiting to see what people, what people say. And I don't know if you recall, Brian, but like one of the things, and I'm going to want to, let's bring on Scott Gladstone. If you recall, one of the very first scenes in the film, which is actually in the treatment, that actually is the first scene in the in the movie, which you see, which is Scott Gladstone's calling a lacrosse game, is it? And yeah, or a soccer game? What is it, Scott?
It was soccer. It was soccer. Yeah.
Soccer, and he's calling a soccer game. One of the things we wanted to show was the way in which life at Colorado College for students within this context, people, you move very fluidly from studying to calling a soccer game to being in the theater production. And that was like in the very first draft of the treatment. And it actually came from a conversation that I had with Scott, who was in a class of mine at the time, where he was talking about the things that he had done. And I thought, that's where that comes from. Well, so thank you, Brian. Let me talk a little bit to Scott. And that was, it's really interesting how that scene, this idea of moving fluidly, that was one of the very first things that we shot, and one of the things that has stayed with us through to the end. Is Scott visible? Are you there, Scott?
Yeah, I'm here.
So was that like a sort of a typical day for you? When you look at that scene where you're moving, for those of you who haven't seen the film, Scott moves from, calling this game into theater, was that a typical day for you? Did you feel like that was like, I remember thinking, when we were deciding about where to go with that scene, people were saying like, who will believe it? And I was saying, that's what he does. But I mean, how does that feel to you looking at it now?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a typical day, but it is during stretches. And that's kind of life on the block plan. I think there was a good job in the film of laying out first week, second week, third week, fourth week, and it is kind of that way where it's just a continual ramp up and then decline. And third week of every even numbered block is usually when a theater production happened. And I always had to check the sports schedule as well, because I was kind of in a niche position there. Not a lot of people like to be on the mic broadcasting or announcing for the games, and so there wasn't a ton of people to step up. So my boss was counting on me to be there and do the things that I'd learned over the course of my time. And so there was always every once in a while kind of those time crunches where it was, going from place to place. And of course that's my work study as well. So I'm there to also make money, hopefully. And then I'm doing, my passion, and I get a credit for the theater classes. And, but I mean, it just takes a lot of balance, a lot of scheduling. And that's definitely something that I got used to more at Colorado College. You see the schedule on paper as 9 to 12 is the class usually, unless you're in, a class that has afternoon labs, and you think, okay, I got so much free time on my hands. And I mean, just like everybody especially people that were involved in subjects in the film, I mean, it's not noon to 9 or 10 p.m. or whenever you go to bed. I mean, I'm not saying I went to bed at 9 or 10 p.m. But yeah, it's okay time.
You keep it busy. I go to bed though. That's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're lucky, if it's first week, maybe you go to bed at 9 or 10 p.m. But yeah.
One of the great, there's, you were a student of mine before you were in the film, and now I think it's like 1,000 people have seen the film, and we get hearing like a lot of feedback about it. A lot of people love this. One of the things we got very excited about was when we were like at a certain, again, this seems all, you see it in the film, you think it was always in the film. But one of the exciting moments certainly was in the film was when I was teaching my Shakespeare in London class, and you said to me, I'm coming on the Shakespeare in London class. And we were like, wow, Scott's coming, I guess this is part of the movie now. And people have really responded really positively to that. Was, looking back on that, was that a cool thing or?
Yeah. I mean, it's something that I think can't be stressed enough. And I think the film hit on it as much as they could without, beating a dead horse too much. But I personally would not have been able to study abroad for financial reasons and for time reasons, in terms of not being able to take a semester off or anything at a regular school that was on a regular semester or maybe even quarterly schedule. But I was incredibly lucky because of the block plan and because of the financial aid that Colorado College suited me with, that I was able to take 8th block abroad with Andrew Manley in London, and that was a performance abroad class. And then that worked well where I went right into the summer block with you in London as well. And I mean, that's something I still talk about, I mean, constantly, because it's one thing to sit in a classroom and, you know, watch a video of a performance or watch a movie based on a Shakespeare play or something, but it's a completely different thing to be in the Globe and look and talk with actors. I mean, we got a chance to go to some talks and really experience kind of the next evolution of where you go with Shakespeare, as well as reading the original text, you know, in Stratford-upon-Avon, where you know, Shakespeare was born and lived when he wasn't, you know, part-time when he wasn't in London, and it's all these experiences that, you know, again, I mean, I can't stress enough, I wouldn't have been able to do that at another school. I wouldn't have been able to you know, have those I just would have more limitations in place in terms of my study abroad capabilities. And for somebody from, you know, fairly small town Montana, it was a complete, just out of world experience. I don't know, but for me, and just incredible. And I'm so glad that you know, we got the camera out there to experience in some ways, because I think that hit with a lot of people. I mean, I know I can tell my mom all about the trip and studying abroad, but you know, your final talk on the banks of the Thames, that's I mean, it's almost like people were there and people experienced it in a way with us, which that was really cool to see.
Well, I mean, you are one of the most patient people that I know in making this film, and also one of the things. Now, Scott, tell us, what is the program that you're doing now? You graduated.
Yeah, I'm currently a graduate assistant at North Park University in Chicago. I'm the graduate assistant of sports information and game management. A lot of what I'm doing is broadcasting games, interviewing athletes for social media and other sort of platforms to get it out and to help, you know, publicize the team essentially. And that's why pretty soon here in a couple minutes, I'm going to have to head out, because we have a college conference of Illinois and Wisconsin tournament game that wasn't originally on the schedule, but luckily our women's team is doing really well and we're hosting the game. And so I'm going to go broadcast that pretty soon here. But it's something that a lot of classwork that I've done with you in terms of radio journalism, sports journalism, a lot of my theater classes have helped prepare me for this. But at the same time, like I mentioned, the free time that I was able to get on the block plan, where I could work either in plays or, you know, with the athletic department, and, you know, my incredible bosses in the athletic department, Dave Reed, Jerry Cross, and Andy Obringer, that, you know, let me come in. They, you know, knew what I wanted to do, and that I wanted to be involved with sports, and that I was confident, you know, using my voice. And it's that learning that, you know, no matter how many radio journalism classes I take, you learn by doing. And I don't know. I haven't taken a radio journalism class at regular school, but we got to do stuff in your radio journalism class, and I got to do stuff in the free time that was allotted to me due to the block plan. And so I really feel like I'm one of the most prepared people coming out of undergrad for, you know, intense times, which it is right now, with a lot of sports kind of squashed into one time period. But you know, it's all about hitting the ground running, and that's what CC has let me experience.
Well, I mean, it's such a, you know, about it's interesting. You always want to like bring up the things that are like that happen off camera that no one sees in the documentary. One of the things that I really like about the Shakespeare class in London is that it captures the way in which we run that course on a shoestring so that it remains accessible to you know, it's so relative. I mean, it costs money, but it's still relatively affordable, because in that class that I was teaching in there, we're either in the backyard of a hostel or actually in the common room of a hostel, which is like not a classroom, like it's not an official space. And one of the things, if you recall, is that we would have class in that common room, and there would be a guy in there who, after the class ended, would yell at me about how wrong I was about Brexit and everything. So that's a fond memory of mine,
Yeah.
you know, of you and Michael Wright kind of hanging around, lingering, and making sure that I wasn't, beaten up.
Yeah, well, and I mean, something also with that class is obviously we saw some of the final day, but I mean, we also had classes in some really cool places that weren't the near the hostel. When we got to go out to the southwest southwest coast there, and obviously Stratford upon Avon. We were talking about Shakespeare at really historical Shakespeare spots, and dissecting the play, and then we would watch it at the theater in Stratford upon Avon, and all this really cool stuff that I'm really happy I got to experience it, and I'm pretty sad that I'm not going to be able to experience it. I mean, I'm hoping to go back, obviously, and watch more Shakespeare, but it makes me sad I'm not going to experience it that same way, because you really bond with your professor and your fellow classmates. I only knew a couple of my classmates in that class, and they were obviously really close to me, but I also met a ton of other people, and it's a really good way to bond with people, and not only socially but academically and mentally as well, and trying to not necessarily debate but get into really interesting arguments, especially about Shakespeare. That's something that's talked about a lot, but it's hard to kind of get in really deep with people that aren't on the same wavelength as you.
Yeah, no, I mean, thank you for reminding me. We went to Cornwall, actually. That was not in the movie, but we actually went to the Cornish coast, in which we saw a production of As You Like It, I think, and
yeah,
it was the coolest production of Shakespeare that I've ever been at. It was open air on the Cornish coast in early May or late May. It was it was -10 or something.
It got cool. I mean, it was like watching a playoff game at Lambeau Field or something. It was really, really chilly.
Well, I want to let you go, but I want to thank you again for being in this movie, particularly at the very end of things. I was just saying before we went on, we filmed the last interview with you in March, right? We were sort of still in the kind of feeling of maybe it won't be that long of a pandemic. And I remember we snuck into Cornerstone and did the filming there, and we didn't really know when the film was going to come out, so we had to do many takes of the last bit of it. So
and can I just say, I think, and hopefully maybe this segues into some other things you're going to talk about, but I just want to applaud you and a lot of the other subjects and interviewees for making the documentary not just CC and the block plan is great, but also highlighting some of the things that CC is still struggling with, that the block plan is really struggling with. I mean, if there's one thing that I thought that the documentary did well, it is not shy away from, these things that I feel like over the course of my 4 years, there was a lot of really cool highs, but there was also some lows for the institution, for a lot of individuals at the institution. And I felt like the documentary showed that, and I wasn't afraid to show that, and I applaud you and everybody else for being honest and knowing that we can continue to get better.
Thank you for saying that, Scott. And that's indeed, that was a deliberate choice to show the college at its strongest moments, and also the moments when it's tested most severely. So
thank you for having me on.
And I'm gonna bring on Jackie to say hello a little bit and to catch up with her. Hi, Jackie. Tell us, first of all, catch us up on what's up. Since you've graduated, one of the great disappointments of the film is that we didn't get to film your graduation.
Yeah.
And that was. Tell us, just catch us up a little bit at where you are now.
Yeah. Well, pretty disappointed about graduation myself, but I am in Denver now. I'm currently doing a year-long public interest fellowship program with the Colorado Children's Campaign, and I'm working as a communications and advocacy fellow.
One of the best moments in the film, I think, is when I ask you one of my worst questions. I say something like, "So what's it like being an international student?" And you're like, You know, how does that, looking back on that, I remember we had done many interviews. We were sort of, it was kind of getting late at night at that time. Looking back, how do you, you know, what's your take on the film now, looking at it now, and you know, what's your thoughts about it?
Well, I think, I mean, that the filming took place towards the end of my junior year. And I think sort of looking back at it as an alum, I'm like, oh my goodness, I was so busy. Like there's a point where I talk about, you know, the number of jobs I was working and all the things that I was doing. And I think that was a really crazy thing to remember, because I feel like on the block plan, you're always moving and there's not a lot of time to sort of stop and think. And I think looking back on that and watching that as a graduate was really nice, but also sort of shocking in some ways, but I think a pretty accurate depiction of what my life was at CC for the 4 years.
I think people often, I think that people see the film, and I've heard the similar kind of thing, you know, feedback about your participation in the film. People are like, is she really that? Does she do that many? Is she do? How is that many things possible? And you know, I guess that when we think about the block plan, that's one of the questions that we ask. That kind of push and pull between, you know, the pressure to, you know, that you can do many things, but then the pressure to do it. Looking back on your experience of the block plan, was that a positive thing, or was it less so?
I think for the most part, I would say that it was positive. I think it came with its downsides. You know, I'm an international student and was on a full scholarship and sort of working 3 jobs and on work study. And I think, of course, that part of it wasn't always great because, you know, you're balancing the things that you love to do. Like I love to do spoken word and was directing Colorado College's spoken word group for 3 years. And on top of it, taking classes on the block plan, which I think was overwhelming, but I also can't think of a lot of other schools where I would have the capacity to do all of those things. You know, I think if you think of it in the context of the semester plan, people would say that's like completely impossible, right? And I think on the block plan, it was difficult, but it was also really amazing that I was able to do all of those things and, you know, still fit in the things that I really enjoyed about college, like being a part of after school activities and extracurriculars rather.
One of the great things about your parts in the film, and one of my favorite parts of the film, is the way in which your work makes it in to the film, the way in which your poetry makes it in. And I love that poem. I've heard that now we've edited the poem. We've edited the movie so many times. I think I have it memorized. And a couple of people have written to us to ask, has it been published? Where can they find more of your work?
So that piece hasn't been published, but I do have a poetry Instagram where I post most of my stuff, but nothing has been officially published yet. Yeah, I kind of work with my social media and get my stuff out there through that route.
What's your feeling about your work now, looking at it in the film? Do you think, are you like, you know, I mean, in my experience of hearing my own work, I have one of two reactions. It's either like right on or like, yikes. How do you feel about it?
I think it's a combination. One thing that I always say is that doing spoken word at CC from the beginning to the end of my career at CC was really just me documenting my entire college experience, which I think was really awesome and like really great to look back at. I think on a level of like, oh, do I want to keep this and do I want to publish this? I definitely cringe from time to time. But there's a lot of pieces that I'm really proud of. I think being a part of a group like Speakeasy, really like a lot of the work that I brought to the table was heavily workshopped and critiqued by amazing other writers and students. And I think because of that, I did walk away from CC with a lot of pieces that I'm very proud of because of that support. So mostly good, sometimes cringy.
I think that's, you know, if you could be that positive, I think it's good. I love that poem. And I love it that Speakeasy is in the film. It's interesting the way in which is one of the things about the sections involving you and also Liza is this sort of in Scott, it begins with you waking up. You know, it has this sort of moment, and that is kind of a residue of the early treatment. I had this idea that one of the things that set up the block plan apart from the semester system is that everybody goes to school at the at the same time. And this sort of image of like an aerial drone, the things that don't make it into the of like everyone running around the campus in block one. But looking back on that, are you happy that you're not being filmed anymore, or do you miss it?
I don't know if I would say I miss it per se, but it was a really cool experience. I think it was definitely a little weird at first, but I was so busy that I feel like I just was living my life and doing everything as I normally would, just knowing that there was like a camera in the crowd or a camera in the corner of my workspace or whatever it was. So yeah, it was weird, but I thought it was cool, and I was really happy to be a part of it. And I'm just so happy with the result too. I think it's an amazing piece of work.
Well, thank you. And thank you also for one of the things that happened in the making of the film was that, we had set up and been like, what had happened, we needed to get exit interviews with at least some of the people.
Yeah.
One of them was you, and we had set up, and I referenced our attempts to film Scott, which had to be shut down successively. We would get set up in Cornerstone. Campus safety would come in and say the COVID levels are too high. I'm sorry that, and we did it at successive times, and we were like in a very late stage of the film, and we were like, we need to get Jackie to say, and I don't even remember, you came to my house, and we we were outside. This was hot. This was like in the moment where we were very scared.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were of course always very scared, but this was we didn't really, and we had this like. I remember turning on. It goes to show you again the utility of the radio journalism class which you had taken, and you knew a lot. You know a lot about recording. I just simply handed you the thing, and you recorded your final outro. Do you remember that?
I do. That was, just such a crazy time, because we were actually supposed to film earlier, but I think in the midst of the pandemic and trying to find a job and trying to figure things out with my family, I struggled to make it to campus to do that. But that was, like so crazy to look back at. And I think taking that course with you definitely helped, because I was like, okay, I have to be at the corner of the mic. I have to move like this. Like I know exactly what to do. But so it worked at a distance. We figured it out.
No, I remember you coming and I say, all right, listen, you don't have to do this. You don't want to. All right, but I've got it going. I've sanitized the mic and the recorder. Yeah. I will hand it to you, and you can do it from the end of the driveway. I will shout the questions at you, and you can say them in there. But you never know. You don't see that. There's sort of a little bit of behind the scenes kind of thing.
Yeah. I was literally on my way to Denver that day. I was actually leaving. I had come to your house to say thank you, and was like, my bags were packed. Like I had a full car in your driveway, was ready to move up to Denver and to have that interview right in between. So it was just a funny time.
Well, thank you again, and thank you for doing this. Let's call in David Struthers here. Let's go back now, David, to say a little bit, and I'm going to get him to say a little bit about it. David is an alum from around the time when the block plan was in the process of being founded, and he was one of the people. Now you recall from last week that Glenn Brooks had set up a planning office in the basement of Armstrong. Now you, David, you were part of that planning office, part of that the work to set up the block plan initially. That was very much a student effort, and you were key to that, if I recall.
Well, I was fortunate to have Glenn Brooks as an advisor. This was way back in the dark ages. I'd gone 2 years to school at Ripon College and then transferred into Colorado College in 68, 69, and Glenn Brooks was my advisor. And of course, Glenn Brooks is the captain of this wonderful block plan ship, and recruited me to be a student member to help work on the plan. And so part of the unique experience was studying under the ordinary schedule, helping as a student, in a very modest role, I will tell you, to design the block plan, and then returning after the University of Saigon to study under the block plan. So I had that experience of not only the creativity and working with Glenn, but also experiencing the old system and experiencing the new system.
What was your, you had a very specific job, and you talked a little bit about it in the film, a very specific job. One of the challenges, I guess, about moving to the block plan, on a semester system, you can use a room 2, 3, maybe even 4 times, during a day. Moving to the block plan, all the classes more or less run concurrently. Even if they don't run concurrently, you have the idea of a course room rather than a classroom, a sort of home for the course. Now, your job, as I understood it, and if one of you could talk a little bit about that, was to measure the campus and to find out not to measure the campus, but to find any space that could conceivably be used as a classroom. Is that right?
Now, that's exactly right. So we're moving from a system where you have ordinary classrooms with whatever, 20, 25, 30, whatever the number is, to the small seminars where we have 8, 10, 15 people. And so obviously you don't have enough classrooms to divide the entire campus up for those small groups. So one of my jobs indeed was to literally take a tape measure and explore every single space in Colorado College. I mean, I got access to the museum room with a big whale hanging on the ceiling on the top of Palmer Hall, and in the basement. Where could we have seminars? Where could we conceivably work? Because we're going to have a lot more spaces. And then, of course, there was one rather embarrassing incident that occurred because I just assumed, oh, okay, I got to go measure everything. So the campus owns a bunch of houses, and this was in the early summer. And I went into the houses, just opened the door and started measuring things in the houses. And of course, it was a private residence of Hanya Holm, who did summer dance at Colorado College for like 20 years, one of the world's great dancers. And I'm in there measuring her floor, and Hanya Holm walks in. Of course, I took classes with her, but she walks in and says, "What are you doing here?" in her German. But that was part of my job, is to do that, as well as just brainstorm with all the other students that Glenn had recruited, as well as faculty, about how this would look if we really tried it.
Can you say a little bit about what the campus atmosphere was like from a student perspective? Like, we often hear about the block plan and its founding from the perspective of the faculty, who are involved in that vote. Can you talk a little bit about it as a student? Like, tell me a little bit about what the feeling on campus was like in, 69 or around that time.
Well, of course, it was the civil rights era. It was the Vietnam era. There was art happenings all over the place, including on Colorado College campus. So you had all of those additional things, which one would expect at a wonderful liberal arts college, but you had all these outside world events taking place as well. But this tremendous excitement of this bubbling idea that people are aware about and that people talk about. And that was a great part of the excitement that blended into everything else happening at that particular era in our country's history. There was this sense of something really special that was happening here, and people wanted to get in on it.
And I've been asking the other students, I asked Scott and Jackie what they're up to now. So what are you up to now, having graduated from Colorado College?
Well, let's see. I was in arts management for 5 years, assistant manager of the Colorado Springs Symphony, director of a 54-person touring arts festival in the 70s. Then went to law school, and today I'm a practicing trial lawyer. I'm 73 years old and practicing full time, and working full time in the COVID era. But I can tell you, in the world of law and creativity, you get to apply all those incredible things that come from a liberal arts education, especially one, I don't want to sound like a commercial, especially one of the quality of instruction that we got at Colorado College, with the likes of folks like yourself or Tim Fuller and Bob Levy, Fred Sonderman, Glenn Brooks, John Finley, Dave Finley, et cetera, et cetera. So I get to apply every day the things that started bubbling back there at Colorado College. That's not an exaggeration.
And you were very involved in the 35th anniversary of the plan. And that's how I sort of knew about you. I had seen your work about that. And if you look forward, do you expect the block plan will be around in another 50 years?
Oh, yes, there's no question about it. Now, one of the things I think you observed in the film, and by the way, the film was spectacular. The documentary was spectacular in every regard, from the direction, the conception, the evolution, the camera work, the editing of sound and visuals. Congratulations. It was an amazing piece of work. And I know that you and I exchanged messages about the amount of B-roll, and I think Brian mentioned this. The amount of B-roll you had to narrow that thing down to 1 hour and 23 minutes was incredible. So nice work. Congratulations. It'll be around in 50 years. I'm surprised that more institutions haven't adopted it. I know it's been studied widely. You featured the chap from Australia. We know that there are a couple of other colleges in the nation that do a block plan, none quite like, nor quite as successful as Colorado College. It is going to be around for 50 years, but it was a bold move when the faculty voted and the faculty was split, as you highlighted. And it was a successful in the fall of 1969, successfully voted on the faculty meeting. And unlike today's present time, when the vote went for the block plan, even those dissenters who voted against it said, we're going to do this. This is a bold, incredible thing. It will definitely be around in 50 years and probably 100 years, just like Colorado College, that picture of Colorado College from the 1800s with the lone building on the prairie.
Well, thank you for being in the film, and thank you for all that you've done for the college. I like to. You are the most senior alum that we have with us. I like to call in now. Go ahead.
Nicely seen.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, sorry.
You're the oldest guy. That's all right.
I like to invite up now our current student. We have actually a current student, Liza, who's actually still at Colorado College. And in the film, she was a first-year student at the time. Liza, can you? One of the things when the film was just about to come out, I got a lot of. I started getting texts from you saying, "Hey, listen, I see this movie's coming out. I want to see it." And so, can you say a little bit about you're a filmmaker yourself. Did it surprise you? Did it disappoint you? How did it look?
Well, I think to start, I want to echo what everybody has said so far, that I think it was so well done. I enjoyed watching it so much. I had a little screening with my housemates and was incredibly surprised by the amount of history that was included. And during the scene when the vote was being counted to approve or deny the block plan, my heart was beating really fast. I mean, obviously it was approved. We're doing the block plan right now, but there was this moment where I was like, oh my gosh, this is intense. I didn't realize. But watching it, I was very impressed. I was horrified at myself. I think it's only been 2 years, I guess, but I hardly recognize myself, which was kind of fun in a way, I feel like everybody has the experience when they get to college and they're like, I don't know who I am. I'm just trying to figure it out. And that was documented for me. And I got to look back on it and be like, okay, you were that and now you're this. You figured it out. I don't know. I think I got to see a lot of growth in myself while watching that, which was pretty cool. But yeah, I was very nervous to see it. I think because I knew in my heart, I don't recognize that version of myself and was a little anxious about it, but well done.
One of the things I told you, Liza, is that in sort of showing the film, we showed it to different audiences. We showed it to alums, and we showed it to also people who didn't know very much about Colorado College and younger people. And the audiences, particularly of high schoolers that I showed it to, I think I told you, my daughter in particular has seen the movie more times than I think she should, than she's willing to remember. Every time there's a moment when you have a kind of an emotional moment about trying to get in the final cut of a film, which by the way, I can really now totally relate to. And every time you say I'm so tired, my daughter Frances says, I love her. And I mean, how do you feel about those moments of stress and the way in which, you know, you really do provide us a way to talk about one of the real challenges of the block plan, having to do with, you know, that, you know, managing stress and you know, what's your take on it now?
I think that that moment is very real, and I think I've experienced that like exact moment of reaching the amount of tiredness where I like I'm just delirious and have no control over my emotions. I've reached that moment once a block my entire CC career, whether it's writing a paper or working on an art project, making a film. And I think like when I was watching it, I was kind of a little like uneasy, you know, like why did it didn't feel good seeing myself that stressed, you know, about just a school project. But I think in a way it's one of the cool things about CC. Like I wouldn't get that emotional about a project that I don't care about. And I think it says a lot about um, you know, like the energy that we as students put into our classes, wanting it to be good and pulling enough all-nighters to invest in the success of any type of project or paper. I don't know if I don't necessarily know that that's healthy. I'm hoping those moments start to decline as I graduate and go through my adult life, or maybe I'll figure out some better stress management skills. But you know, they're real, and I think they say a lot, and I think I don't know, they lead to this amount of like pride that you get when you go through that emotional roller coaster. You stay up all these nights, all your friends know what you're working on, and then you hand it in, or you have a movie screening or an art critique, and you get to be like, I made that, and it took a lot of tears, but like I'm proud of it, and I put in the work, and now I get to show it off.
One of the things, you know, like making of a documentary, like the writing of a novel, is you feel these other versions of it. Like if you when you've been involved in the chat, you know, kind of trailing behind, and you see a little bit in the way in which you talk about stress and the plan. You also though are afforded as an opportunity. We didn't really get to give this the space in the film that I would have liked. About illness on the plan. Now you were in the I think it's in the spring of your first year at the college. You were concussed, and
Mhm.
that had that, you know, and that was like that was a really we captured that. That never made it into the film, but that was also a challenge, right? Illness on the plan.
Totally. Yeah, I think, you know, I mean, I work in the admissions office now, and one of the biggest questions or most frequently asked questions that we get is like, what if you get sick on the block plan? What if there's a family emergency and you have to go home? And I think the flexibility of the block plan makes it so that like it's okay. You know, you can drop a block and still graduate on time, whether it's for a concussion, a, a death in the family, even just a mental health need. You can take time off. Whereas if you're at a school that's on a semester plan, if you need time for yourself for whatever reason, you have 4 or 5 classes that you're responsible for taking. You can't just like take a week off or a couple weeks off, you know? And I mean, I've taken at least one block off every year that I've been at CC, especially this year with the pandemic. I think this is my 3rd or 4th block that I'm taking off, and I'm still going to be able to graduate on time. And I think it makes school feel a lot more doable. You know, you like have that escape in your back pocket. You know, if the going gets tough, you can just take some time off, go home, get your needs met, and it'll be okay.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, as other folks have been saying, that one of the things that was important to us was not to make a piece of propaganda, but an interrogative work in many ways. And if it could be that one of the you know, one of the things, one of the lasting interrogations that come from the pandemic is the consideration of how illness and the block plan, you know, how they coexist, and the ways in which we can think about the block plan as being, you know, a more, you know. As less stressful, as affording these different sorts of modes of entry into it.
Yeah, less stressful and more stressful. You know, you got the different things going on. I mean, I know a lot of other schools right now are adopting the block plan as a way to address the pandemic and online learning. And I've heard that some schools are thinking of adopting it permanently. I think at risk of like avoiding this sounding like a propaganda piece, as you're saying. I don't know. I think the blog plan's great. I think it works for a lot of people. Some people it doesn't work based on your, your learning style. But I think especially for personal needs, whether you just need some time off or like I was saying before, something happens, just makes it so much easier to manage your time and kind of take ownership over your time and your education as well.
Well, thank you for that, and it's totally. We wanted the film not to look like we can all be propaganda. Well, thank you again for being in the film, and thank you for the trust that you put in us in order to tell your story. And now, finally, I'd like to call up, invite to the stage Johnny Reed, who has joined us, and Johnny is like most of the people in the film, somebody who I knew before. We made the film. I met Johnny. I don't know if Johnny remembers. Do you remember when we met?
Yes, Professor Hayward, absolute pleasure to be here. We actually met in Toronto when my course with Dean Edmonds, Drama Away, had a mutually beneficial event with your course, fill in the blank, the name of it, at the University of Toronto.
Yeah, that's right. We met. I have a clear memory. We met in a elevator in New College in Toronto, and we were coming up, and we stepped in the elevator. You said, "I'm Johnny Reed," and now you're in this film. What is your take on this film, Johnny? Now that you graduated. What is it? 5 years ago?
2013. So are we 7, right?
8 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, 8. Yeah.
8 years ago, looking back, how do you feel like the film, does it do justice? Does it represent your experience of the plan? Any thoughts on that?
My immediate response is that it's a timeless piece, quite frankly, because it introduces a myriad of elements of CC's life. It introduces its history, and more specifically, it introduces the cultural facets, the academic cultural facets, the social cultural facets, and it also is a precursor to potentially what's to come next. As my fellow alum, Mr. Struthers, indicated that there were a number of historically relevant instances occurring during the decision to make the block plan. For example, the civil rights movement, a number of civil rights issues, in addition to the Vietnam War. And we'd be remiss to say that some of those same instances are occurring in this very moment. And it's reasonable to assume that in the next 50 years or the next 100 years, some of those same instances will be repeating themselves. And so I definitely wanted to first name that I watched it in the concert of close friends and also fellow alum, and name that it feels like a timeless piece. And it also speaks to the different experiences that have occurred over the time of the Block Plan on CC's campus, and gives honor to them as well.
What did you, one of the things that happened during the making of the film, as we were making the film, was the intervention of the Black Student Union at the faculty meeting that we document in the film. You were doubtless aware of that occurring, and I wonder if you could reflect on your experience of racism at the college, and if you are you optimistic about the changes and the initiative at the college to become an anti-racist institution?
Good question. I think so. When the issue of the racist email was sent out to the entire campus, as an alum, I reached out to other alum to write letters of support. The email targeted phenomenally brilliant and phenomenally supportive leaders of the college who poured into myself and a number of other students. And so as an alum, I galvanized fellow alum, and we wrote letters of support to those individuals who were targeted by such a defamed email, and told them that despite the racism, discrimination that we're navigating in this institution or even in this country, we love you. We know who you are at the essence of the best version of yourselves. And we applaud your resilience and your mentorship today and forevermore. Additionally, when the second instance of racism occurred on campus, I was actually invited to come to campus to facilitate conversations around mental health and wellness with the Black Student Union, and even perform a series of thoughts around how I navigate stress and trauma as it is related to racism, stress, and discrimination. And so, to answer your question in a very succinct fashion, Professor Hayward, am I optimistic around the pursuit towards being an anti-racist institution that Colorado College is pursuing? I think on the one end, I am healthily optimistic that pursuing and announcing that that Colorado College is pursuing to be an anti-racist institution, that is a healthy thing to announce. But I am also critically aware that we must hold Colorado College's leaders accountable. As I am the product of Colorado College, I am steadfast and I have hope, I have optimism, I have imagination, and I have vision, but I am also anchored in practice. I'm also anchored in holding individuals accountable to practicing what we preach, because there's a lot at stake here. We're talking about the well-being of students who look like me, right? We're talking about the well-being of a number of students who may feel marginalized in different experiences. And with the right conversations had on campus, students like myself, students who share my cultural background, who share this incredible skin that I possess, in addition to a myriad of other cultural identifiers that I do possess and that I don't possess, they can feel like they can be the best version of themselves on campus and then proceed to make a tremendous impact beyond their experience at Colorado College. And so, in short, I am positively optimistic that the pursuit of being an anti-racist institution is going to relieve a level of stress for students. But I think the practice of being an anti-racist institution is going to alleviate even more stress to support students and staff in the process of being the best version of themselves in an white supremacist country that is consistently perpetuating elements of discrimination and racism, to say the least.
Can you say a little bit about the work that you're doing now? Like, where have you gone? Tell us about your journey since you've left the college.
Yes, so since Colorado College, I've been an educator, a community organizer, and quite frankly, an artist. And in this very moment, to draw an alignment to my block plan experience, I never felt like a specific major spoke to me. And throughout my 4 years at Colorado College, I consistently tried to fit into majors or learning experiences that came before I arrived. And then in realizing that I just don't fit in and that that's okay, I realized that I must create the experience that is well suited for me. And so I got tired of being a good seed in bad soil and then created the soil that was just right for me. And so in 2017, I launched an organization by the name of Project Heal. And it is a national mental health organization that focuses on supporting organizations, education leaders, and also students on understanding how trauma impacts a student's ability to learn. And so in 3 brief phases, we implement trauma-informed education for school leaders and school staff. We implement mental health education for students, and we establish meditation and calming centers on a school campus. And then in phase 3, we implement trauma-informed education for parents and caregivers so that schools can have a trauma-informed wraparound service that fully functions in supporting students' mental health needs, parents' mental health needs, and the mental health needs of teachers and staff members. And my organization is like a block plan. Quite frankly, it's like I live on call because, as you can imagine, stress and trauma are at an all-time high as a result of transitioning through COVID as we prepare to transition back into some semblance of in-person education. And our organization is managing more than 20 partnerships across the nation in more than 15 states. And to be able to name that I am a Colorado College alum is an honor, because each partnership like that I manage is like a block plan in of itself. And so you think about experiencing 8 blocks in a year, I have 22 partnerships working concurrently that I manage as a leader of my organization. And I'm humble to be able to say that I made it through the Colorado College block plan, because managing my own organization is definitely like a lifelong block, where in which I have to plan intermittent vacations to stay mentally balanced, as Liza referenced earlier. No, and to what Liza referenced earlier, I ran out of stamina to pull all-nighters, and I have to plan vacation and rest as I continuously live as an alum.
We're running sort of over time, and I can't let you go. I have to ask you 2 more questions. Again, I want to thank you for being in this film. We spent a lot of time with a lot of, and you're so great on camera, and it's you bring so much to the film. Did that really happen with Jill, where you gave her the tour, or was that did you...
It was a true story, similar to Liza's experience. I too worked in the admissions office, and I was a tour guide. I was a tour guide, president of a fraternity in the student government, was also the Black Student Union president. And they called me and a close friend of mine, Jimmy Singer, to lead a tour. And we culturally, we were entirely different, but in our heart and in our minds, we were Colorado College. Jimmy Singer is from Louisiana. Well, he lived in New Orleans, Louisiana for an extensive period of time. So we're talking about a cool white guy with a long beard, just scruffy, nice flannel, jeans, and some Sperry's, where I'm in a suit leading a tour to Jill and her husband. And the emphasis was placed on Mr. Kevin being this top-notch economics professor. And Jill had on sunglasses and a hat. And she asked us 2 questions throughout the entire tour. She asked us where we were from. And at the conclusion of the tour, she asked, how's the weather here? And then fast forward 6 months, at the conclusion of the school year, there she was, or at the conclusion of one school year and the opening of the next, there she was giving a speech on how she was accepting her invitation to be the Colorado College president. And then she takes down her glasses as she's walking out of Shove and asks me, hey, how'd I do, kid? And I was in awe of her ability to keep the secret under wraps, and then at her ability to accept the invitation to be the college's next president. And our relationship evolved, and I felt like a member of our family as time went on.
Yeah, I remember when we did that, and I was doing that interview with Jill, and she said, yeah, these 2 students gave me a tour. One was Johnny Reed, and I was like, really? And she said, do you know? I said, oh, I don't. Yeah, we met in, met in an elevator in New College. But I can't let you go. I have to say, one of the things that we have in common is a particularly close relationship with President Edmonds, and we've spent a lot of time with him in various different contexts, and I was really moved in how you talked about the way in which the experience of those broad courses enriched you in an academic way, but also in ways that weren't. I think that what you say in the film is something like how to get your dry cleaning, which is like, in that I think that those kinds of interactions between faculty and students, they happen at other institutions, but I don't know that they happen as certainly or with the frequency at Colorado College. And I wonder if you could just speak to both that kind of learning, that sort of curricular adjacent learning, but also most particularly to the impact that President Edmonds has had on you personally.
Absolutely. I think the first thing that comes to mind as I think about the relationships that I've had with CC professors, and also my relationship with Dean Edmonds, is the depth of humanity that exists in the educational experience, right? It's so much depth of humanity that in my own family back home in Chicago, there's so much love and care that I feel like if I make a mistake, someone's going to be right there behind me, put their arms around me, and walk me through the mistake I made, and then support me in the process in becoming the best version of myself that I can't even see. And I think that speaks to the essence of education at Colorado College. I had numerous professors, some of them sharing my cultural identity, others not having any cultural identities in alignment. They walked me through experiences that stretched me to transition or grow into the best versions of myself that I didn't even know existed while I was a student. More specifically, in reference to the relationship that I've cultivated with Dean Edmonds over time, during our time in Canada, I made a number of mistakes simply because I wasn't privy to the ins and outs of theatrical design. I wasn't privy to the ins and outs of how professionals critiqued film, or how professionals critiqued plays like Jersey Boys, or beautiful plays like Anton Chekhov, The Cherry Orchard, right? I just wasn't privy to those things. And so the relationship that he had with education invited me, it made me inspired to make mistakes, because I knew that for a fact on the other side of those mistakes were a better version of me that I hadn't met yet. And I think that as the education experience continued, it's developing personally is a byproduct of great education. And so I can be flourishing academically, and as a result, those academic lessons that I learned become lifelong lessons. For example, just exercising a critical mind on the information that's being presented to me, albeit in a film, in an auditorium of a film, in an auditorium of a play, or in a professional environment in which I am assessing the mental health well-being of entire school networks for staff members, or entire school networks of their students. And I think that critical perspective that I learned in the drama course has lent itself to me being a very critically and culturally relevant trauma-informed educator outside of Colorado College, but in the world today. And I think that it's extremely important. And the nascence of my ability to assess information through a critical lens came from Dean Edmonds's Drama Away course, came from Dean Edmonds's Art of Persuasion course, and our relationship still exists to this day.
Well, thank you for that. And I see that we're over time. I know I hate to cut this, but I want to be respectful of anybody's time, of everyone's time. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, and I most definitely want to thank all of our panelists. Let's have everybody, if we can we have everybody up on the screen one last time, just to say, thank you all there we go. Thank you all for being part of this this amazing project, and for taking the time with us tonight. For our remaining 2 talkback sessions, we're going to postpone them we're going to pick them up in the fall, when we will hope that we will be all together on campus. And one of the things we're going to try to do, if we can, is to have a screening of the film in the new hockey arena, and we'll be in touch with all of you to pull you, if we can, if it's possible at all, to get you back on campus for this homecoming, if we can do it, and that'll have a real celebration then in person. But again, thank you all for being part of this, for giving us your time, and also for trusting us with your story. This film is what it is because of all of you, and thank you on behalf of myself and Brian Beasley, the maestro, from the bottom of our hearts. So thank you all. Stay safe, stay in touch.
Thanks, team. Be great. Thank you all so much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Liza, Jackie, everyone, keep up the great work.
Yeah. Stay in touch, everybody.